This tutorial was brought to you thanks to the supporters on the screen. Check out TAPgiles.com to find more Dreams resources, donate to support my work, or engage my services to get private instruction or help on a project one-on-one. The previous tutorial demonstrated the settings in the first two tabs of the hand tracker, link in the description. Here we continue on to the laser beam settings. So I'll make an object that follows wherever I'm pointing with that laser, and I'll make a visual representation so you can see what's going on. So this stuff down here, it works like a laser scope, but it actually points gun style no matter what, which means away from the camera through the imp point to on to further on. So this arrow here doesn't actually represent this laser scope, not in VR, but in VR it does. And the rest of the settings work in VR as well. So I'll put on VR. So in VR you can see your imp has a laser scope coming out of it, which is what that arrow is talking about, I believe. So if I do that, now that bit of paint is actually accurate to how that laser scope is working, and you can see that it's hitting the ground and then that object is following to that point where I'm hitting. So it works slightly differently in VR to non-VR. The moves also have this laser. So if I try in here, and that matches the arrow and works the same. So the secondary one doesn't have a laser itself, and so it won't like hit anything, but it does have that kind of orientation. So you could add your own laser scope to it. So it doesn't actually have anything going on with that arrow sort of thing. So if you're using the secondary one, then these options all grey out because you can't use the laser scope. But this one is on the primary, so it has all these options. So then you can, by default, it uses the imp's color itself. So my imp is green, so it's got a green laser. So you can change the laser to a different color, so you can actually see it previewing there as I move the colors around like that. If we go blue, so now it's blue in play mode. So you can turn this on, and this overrides from the defaults of how the laser looks to whatever you want. So laser length is what you might expect. So if I make it really short and go into play mode, now it's quite short. Now meters are quite big, so if I go like that, you'll be able to tell. So now it's quite short, and I can't. That thing isn't following anymore because I'm not close enough to it. So if I'm pointing at something, then it's hitting and it's telling that follower where to go. If I'm too far away, then it's not considered hitting, and then it doesn't know where to go, so it stops moving. The beam power is visual only of how the beam looks. So if I put it to 100%, if you're at kind of normal size, you can see this effect of it kind of wobbling and stuff as if it's some really cool beam of laser. And then if I turn it all the way down, then it's really thin and less visible and whatnot, because less quote unquote powerful. But that's just a purely visual thing that you can adjust however you want. And then this is show beam. So if I turn it off, then you won't see the beam, but it's still there, so I can still point at stuff and things still happen. And then show reticule. So that is glowing, has a glowing dot because it's grabbable, and that's just how Dreams works, to let you know it's grabbable. But if you're pointing at the floor or something and that's not grabbable, then you don't see anything at all, unless, and this is on by default, the show reticule is on. The beam strength actually affects the size of the reticule as well. So now it's a larger dot, and you can see it that when I hover over things, it kind of matches that orientation sort of thing, as a nice easy way of helping the player understand where they're pointing. And then the rest of it is just like using a laser, but the laser scopes have a extra tab like the head tracker does that the hand tracker doesn't. So you can't tell it to use X-ray mode or only pay attention to certain labels, but that's the only difference. Now let's show you this same thing in non-VR mode. Yeah, so the laser's always gun style in VR. in non-VR, and in VR it's always like perfectly one-to-one because you have depth tracking and stuff for the DS4 as well. But now let's use the moves in non-VR. So this is in gun style mode as well, where it just draws a line from the camera through the imp tip into the scene and uses that as the laser. But it's worth noting that in non-VR, using the moves, the imp is like this, perfectly one-to-one to what you see here, and the same for in using the DS4. But in VR, the imps are like this, so that it's easier for the laser scope to work. When you're not in VR, it draws a line from the view of the player through the imp tip to the scene, so it would be like pointing down there somewhere, which is different to VR. But then the objects in here still are tied to the orientation of the imp. So then in VR it's going to look like that, and in non-VR it's going to look like that if you can see the imps. So if you had like a gun on here which is going to shoot out like that, then it's going to be harder to kind of hold stuff, because if you're aiming with that line and it's going to emit a bullet in that line or something, then you've got to hold it really awkwardly like this, which is really awkward for the ergonomics of holding the actual move controller. But in the VR mode, you can hold it at like this and the object will still be oriented normally. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something new. Go to patreon.com/TAPgiles to get 5 hours of tutorials early for $3. Here's a preview of what you can learn if you choose to become a supporter.